recording, and I'm going to share my screen as well so I can capture our factors as people are sharing those. Let me get to the right screen. Hang on one second. There. Okay. Can you guys see that factor analysis? The driving down and driving up? Great. I'm going to be looking over to my left here because that's where my other screen is. So I hope that's not distracting. So I'm going to invite you guys to unmute. And here's that baseline that Kalika was talking about. Again, this is the best case. What we think that number is. What is the baseline for the universal number for funding in East King County? And when I think about this, I'm thinking about, is East King County getting the funding needed to fund all of our work? And then we're going to get into focused populations. Is East King County, and how percent or number is East King County getting the funding to serve specific focused populations? But let's start with the universal. So what do we think, you know, do we getting 50% of the funding that we need to serve all populations in East King County? Are we getting 70%?
I would say it's lower. I would say maybe in like the 40% range.
Great. Was that you, Christy?
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Other thoughts about that? Let's take one or two and we'll kind of just do an average. So Christy offered 40.
This is Liz, Eastside Human Services Forum. I don't know, this is just one way to frame it. One would be to look at East King County population relative to the county, the state. The other would be to try to quantify percent of East King County need versus what is funded. That's a little harder to come up with.
Right.
So I actually like to focus more on the need. It's just a little harder to quantify. I know for our forum, we'll be looking at keeping an eye on this special session and trying to hold on to the gains that were made, knowing that cuts will have to be made because of COVID and the downturn in the economy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little subset of funding that will impact the East Side that's probably coming up this summer.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, Liz. If you had to guess, because I know it's harder to get, as you pointed out, what would you say that in East King County, the percentage of need that is getting funding? Like, what is our baseline for that if you had to add to that?
I've been in social services most of my career, and we're woefully underpaid and underfunded. And I would say that on a good day, pre-COVID, it's, I don't know, other people chime in, maybe 55, 60%. I mean, of what if you contract for something, let's say it's shelter bed nights, you know, what you will be reimbursed for the cost of providing the service is very rarely 100%.
Right. That's
but more importantly, how do you get that funding to even start up those programs, especially in an area that is stereotyped as not having high need?
Yeah, and that's what we want. That's what the factor analysis will help with. So if you guys are okay with it, to get us started. Amy, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with Liz. It's just really hard to measure because there's such growing needs in so many ways. And some of them we can measure a little bit more easily, knowing how much food we need to supply or how many beds we need to supply. But there's really tough immeasurable things like the behavioral health impact of COVID, right? And there was already a gap there that's just growing, right? Just to identify the need is huge. So I would say it's a really big gap, definitely significantly under half, just because of such the growing need. I would say we were probably closer to half pre-COVID, and so I would err on the lower side of things, maybe in the 30s if I had to ballpark, but who knows, right? I think we just don't know, to be honest. I think we're just guessing at this point.
Yeah.
Stephanie, I'd like to speak up just a little bit about education, because we all know there's been an issue for a long time of quote unquote fully funding education in our state. And just in Bellevue, which is one of the wealthier communities, what's considered fully funding education doesn't fund the things that are provided by LifeSpring and Backpack Meals and Jubilee Reach and Bellevue Schools Foundation. And so I don't know the numbers. You'd have to talk to someone in the district to know what their budget is and how much is supplemented by these outside organizations, and what the percentage is. But we all know that baseline before COVID, there was terrible underfunding of needs for education, just basic needs.
Yeah.
This is Colleen.
You know, I don't know how many $1 million the budget is, and I don't know how many $1 million is of what's brought in from all these organizations, because a lot of it is they provide services and they don't necessarily give a bill to the district and say how much after school childcare costs, how much extra food for holidays costs. I know that the foundation gives $1.5 million or so a year to the district that they use to pay for, you know, all sorts of things, computer science, and a lot of what we pay for is training for teachers that they wouldn't have without this extra funding. So, I mean, baseline, we know it's not funded fully.
So I hear that consistently across the board, that we just in East King County are not getting the funding needed to serve those in need. And so what I'd like to offer, so we can get into the factors, is East King County funding is to serve those in need is at, and I'm going to take somewhere between Amy, you, and Liz. Amy, you offered 30%. Liz, you said 50 to 55. So I'm going to say about 40%. So we're receiving 40% of funding to really serve those in need. So that's our baseline.
Can I just add something, Colleen from United Way? I understand the purpose of this argument and that we don't, or this exercise, that we don't need super hard numbers, but I do feel anxious when we're just picking numbers based on gut and it's a percent. It's not a, I mean, we probably know in some fashion what the actual dollar amounts are that are being invested, and it would just be great to be working off numbers. I also don't think we have a good definition of need, in the sense of, is need the minimum? Is need the Cadillac? I mean, we have a problem in housing where we don't accept, you know, bare minimum solutions. We want everyone to have a middle class housing situation, and press back really hard against things like tiny villages and such. So, you know, it's just so subjective that I have this like anxiety about the subjectivity. So I just wanted to put that out there, and I'm sorry that's not constructive. It's just, I had to say it.
No, I totally appreciate that, Colleen. And one thing I want to offer in response to that is that this is an iterative process. We have to start somewhere. So this is in the spirit of start to identify those factors. And as we move along this path and we're taking action commitments to gather more data, we'll get more data to really understand fully what that baseline is. So in the spirit of iteration, totally agree with you. It does cause anxiety for others, including me. And in the spirit of kind of starting to identify those factors, it's a starting point. Liz, did you want to add one other thing?
I do, but I want to give other people, I just want to say, for me, it's not just people in need, it's for people to thrive. So an education belongs to everybody. You know, decent housing belongs to everybody. So I don't want to have a conversation that's just the most needy, you know, only people at this percent. Anyhow, so just, I think we want a community where people can get their needs met and thrive.
Awesome. Super. Thank you. Okay.
I just want to add a little bit into that. You know, like I see the percentage you're making. I by any means will know exactly what percentage. I just telling you for the population that I represent and I'm working with, 40% for me is still even too high. But based on exactly what you just mentioned, Lisa, that based on the need to try, I just see it at they go by the percentage of Latino population on the east side. They say it's not the same than in the south or somewhere else. So really the funding doesn't come here at all for us.
Yeah, that's a great addition, Alma. And I absolutely want to bring that in when we start to talk about focus populations, because that is an added element that we have to really look at. This first part is kind of in general. So let's just take, you know, if we had maybe 5 for each. This is for the universal population, for the funding in East King County to serve those in need and to thrive is about 40%. So what are the factors that are driving that number down? So why is it, you know, 40% versus 20%? So in this case, it's almost reversed. So the pushing that number down is you know, the things that are not working. And then what are the things that are pushing that number up? So how is it that we're serving more? So it's the things that are working.
I think pre-COVID, the one of the things that was suppressing that number in East King County is that the need is so great in South King County, and that we need a regional approach so that we can address the needs of focus populations without pitting one sub-region against another. Because we may have a desperate need in a particular focus population in East King County, but it gets masked by the wealth. And it would be great to find a way to be more regional with those focus populations, because we don't want to mask it.
I agree 100% with that, and I think it's often a scarcity mentality because there's a finite amount of resource available, and so it often does get parceled out on the basis of need. And I think a compelling argument is you can be just as hungry to be in a crowd of 10 in East King County or a crowd of 100 in South King County. You're still hungry.
What else?
Stephanie, this is Judy from Bellevue School District. I would suggest that another factor that drives us down is a belief that there's enough money in the community to take care of our own.
And I think that kind of shifts blame in a way. It's like I've heard more than once, churches can do this, and the private nonprofit community, and I really feel government has a responsibility as well.
And government will serve everyone, whereas private philanthropy may have more racial biases, or who is our own. So you get a more fair distribution with government.
Argue that on the side of government that our tax
just
structure.
really quickly. Sadly, the time goes by so fast. We're going to have to bring this back. So can we have 1 or 2 that are driving the number up? And again, this is the universal number. So it's 40% versus 20%.
I think, dedicated advocates, the state level, people who've been, telling the story of the East Side and pushing it forward and advocating it at all different levels. Also in the private sector, I mean, Colleen, United Way just raised what, 10 million extra for the rental assistance in a short time. So I think
King County Human Service Alliance is another great one that's raised a ton of money for human services all across the county.
Who is that, Colleen?
King County Human Services Alliance, and they're trying to get cities to increase their portion of their local budgets that go to human services.
Okay, we have about 20 seconds. How about one more pushing the number up?
The data collection, from different organizations.
Awesome.
Show out the real numbers and need.
Maybe private philanthropy as well.
Thanks, you guys.